Today, Dr. David Snitker concludes his interview with a new filmmaker, Joshua Matriciana. They're discussing the DVD written and produced by Brother Joshua titled Transhumanism. This is his first documentary, and it's a blockbuster. Brother David, please tell us some of the experts who appear on the DVD.
This film features well-known researchers and authors such as Tom Horn and Frank Peretti, a respected physicist, Dr. Chuck Missler, and media heavyweight Joseph Farah of WorldNet Daily. This film examines not only the technological developments within transhumanism, but also investigates some of the underlying motivations of the transhumanist movement, its spirituality, and how this movement will affect every person alive today and tomorrow. Well, Joshua, welcome back to our broadcast today.
Oh, thank you, David.
As you know, yesterday we were talking about just some of the definitions of terms and some of the technologies that are involved in transhumanism, knowing that many of our listeners are perhaps unfamiliar with this movement. Today, as time permits, we want to really begin to relate this to the Bible and to God's perspective on this whole movement, particularly as it relates to the end times in which we believe that we are living and the days perhaps just ahead. So we'll certainly want to be giving time for that spiritual perspective. But as we begin today, we realize that there are biological implications of transhumanism, as we talked about yesterday, with the hybridization, mixing man's DNA with animals, as well as the injection of artificial intelligence, brain chips, etc., to enhance our capacities. But there are also spiritual dimensions to this movement as well, and as Christians we certainly don't want to neglect that aspect. One of the terms that you mention in your film is a new term to me. It's a term, digital spirituality. Could you unpack that for us, Joshua?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about transhumanism, we're understanding that its goal is to create a better human being using technology. When we use the phrase digital spirituality, what it's talking about is not necessarily the physical part of human bodies, but also what we would consider the mental capacity, but the spiritual capacity. You know, we're in a very unique time where this generation coming is going to be confronted with issues that no other generation in human history has been introduced to. And one of these has to do with the idea that technology is like, or these technologies can be used like a receiver or a transmitter of information. And putting that directly into our bodies opens up what Chuck Missler talks about, says is a two-way communication. You know, we are potentially opening ourselves up to what in demonology is referred to as an entry or a spiritual interaction. And so digital spirituality is bringing to focus the idea that perhaps, you know, and as you see in these horror films and a lot of the mainstream media is kind of prepping us for this, but you see that demons come through the white static, or, you know, they come through the airwaves. Now that we have this understanding of wireless communication, we're realizing that perhaps we might not be communicating with other humans. Perhaps we'll be interacting or communicating with what the Bible calls demons.
I think that's an important concept. Some of us, perhaps even as Christians, think of demons in rather medieval terms. You know, that demons were things that Jesus dealt with in the first century, but in our sophisticated age, certainly we don't interact with demons today. But what you're stating is that perhaps these advanced technologies could be ways that we're really opening ourselves up in terms of demon activity in our lives as well.
Absolutely. I mean, let's get rid of the term demon and replace it with something like, let's say, alien or artificial intelligence. You know, these, in our society, we're much more ready to accept, you know, a communication from a satellite dish. Ooh, these are, you know, and NASA has been, you know, for dozens of years has been pointing the receivers to space to see if we get any interaction back from perhaps aliens and other planets or whatever. So we're already getting to that point where we're ready to receive messages. We're just eager and waiting. And we're just waiting for that moment when a foreign voice comes over the radio saying, no longer worship Jesus, deny God, or whatever they say.
Okay.
Ready for that.
Well, the technologies that are already commonly in use, computers, laptops, TV, etc., as Edward Snowden and other whistleblowers inform us, we become aware that computers also monitor us, and TVs watch us, and our cell phones are also microphones. So even the technologies that are already in use are clandestinely two-way interactions. We're not just receiving information via these devices, but we are also communicating. There's much more of an interaction than we have been previously aware of. So why would we not expect that as this technology advances, that there is going to be this two-way communication, and that these could be entry points, as you call them, for demon influence? Well, there's another interesting project that this film highlights, and that is a project that is going on at Arizona State University, one of our larger American universities. It's called the Sophia Project. And from my Greek studies years ago, Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom. Tell us about the Sophia Project that Arizona State is working on.
Well, Tom Horn, he talks about, in the film, the Sophia Project that Arizona University is perpetrating. It no longer has any information on their website, but the general consensus of what this was is talking about, not only discovering things that are physical, but trying to see what things are metaphysical as well, like seeing if we can create technology to communicate with aliens, demons, a universal mind, whatever these metaphysical entities are. Now we have a state-sponsored educational facility that their goals are to communicate with these things, with these creatures. So we're left here at kind of a crossroads, right, where we have what we think is, outdated ideas of demons and angels, in white robes and sandals, to now being a much more sophisticated idea where, they're aliens and UFOs, or they're like this new film coming out with Johnny Depp, Transcendence. The internet actually becomes evil because it merges mankind with this technology, becomes essentially a transcendent individual and tries to wipe out all of humanity. Well, we're being prepped for these kind of ideas.
You mentioned the movie Transcendence. It uses of course, the name of the film is Transcendence. There's another term that is used interchangeably with that I'd like for us to discuss, and that's the singularity, this concept of singularity or transcendence. Explain to our listeners what is meant by those terms. Okay,
so there is an incredibly brilliant man named Ray Kurzweil, and he basically coined this term, the singularity. Chuck Missler points out that he misuses the mathematical name for it, but essentially the idea is that it's based on this rule. It's called Moore's Law. The Intel, I believe it's a corporation, Intel kind of coined this term, that information doubles every couple of years. Well, that means that, the amount of knowledge that we have is growing exponentially. I think we mentioned yesterday that human knowledge will, very, very soon, double every 12 hours. All human knowledge. So the singularity is the point where artificial intelligence crosses that point where it is no longer an artificial intelligence, but it becomes its own intelligence. It becomes what many consider an intellect. It discovers, I think, therefore I am. When the computer realizes I am, that's what they say is singularity, which brings a really interesting point. If technology becomes aware, there's this film called AI, I believe. It came out several years ago, Steven Spielberg, where, the robots, feel feelings, and the humans can't tell the difference between the robot and the human. It became very scary. But all that was left in the end, after the humans basically killed themselves through world wars, is that this one robot was the closest thing to human. So what does that leave us here? We have this technology that is moving so quickly, so rapidly. And Kurzweil predicts by the year 2020, we're going to have computers that become aware. What does that mean for us? You know, it's an all-knowing, all-seeing system. Essentially, it's God. It's interesting because in Revelation, we read about, you know, the Antichrist and the prophet of the Antichrist. And there's some very bizarre language there that uses, you know, the beast or the image of the beast. And it's not quite human, but it's not quite, it's something else. It's a beast. And Tom Horn, he speculates on this in the film, saying, you know, perhaps the image of the beast has something to do with perhaps genetic manipulation. You know, that it's not a human, but it's a human that's been altered to be more enhanced. Or perhaps it is it's a computer or a synthetic, you know, a creature that's synthetic biology that has this incredible knowledge because it's connected to the internet or what have you. So there's a lot of speculation there, but the thing is that the more technology increases, the more revelation and the Bible seems to be more and more insightful, in my opinion.
When we talk about the state of technology and the singularity or transcendence, the merger of man and computer, it's really only, as I observe it, a step or two away. For example, within the last year, Google has introduced what they call the Google Glass. Now, I haven't personally seen anyone walking on the street with Google Glass, but I've seen videos of that. And apparently this Google Glass that you wear like a monocle somehow is able to connect you to the internet and obviously make that kind of information very readily available. Well, it seems from a standpoint of proximity, it's just a very small step from a Google Glass to a brain chip. And there's a popular TV series out right now called Intelligence that features their male lead has a brain chip. And so he's able to access the internet and all the different technologies, and it, of course, is always used in a positive and benign fashion to help him, you know, save people, prevent crime, etc. So we have, you know, this almost baby step from what is now being used or introduced, the Google Glass, to the idea of introducing a brain chip so that you're directly connected to all the knowledge, the exploding exponential knowledge that's available to us over the internet. So we're really not talking about science fiction, are we, Joshua?
Not at all. You know, it's interesting to see the way that our society is being gently guided. There's a very well-known term among hypnotists where they say that they prime the audience, and they subliminally give them messages that, you know, that they don't realize that they're getting. But as we see today, not only, as you mentioned with the TV shows, Intelligence and just dozens and dozens more that are priming us to accept these technologies as normal, you know, as not only normal but beneficial. You know, it's like there's been this big debate about the NSA wiretapping all these people, but when it comes down to things like Facebook or Gmail, or is the government allowed to read my personal information? Well, there was a trade-off. You know, when we signed up for Facebook, or it was a free service. We didn't realize, though, at the time, that we get into a contractual agreement with this company to own our personal data, what we like, what our preferences are. And then they go ahead and sell that. So now we're taking it's a trade-off. It seems so benign, but wait till it gets to a step further. So it's not just, you know, what we like, what we don't like, but it's what we believe or what we don't believe. And that's the ultimate deception there, the ultimate hook.
We're speaking today with Joshua Matriciana, the writer and director of the fascinating new documentary film Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity. Let's bend the curve a little bit as we dig, Joshua, more into the, quote, spirituality of this movement in our remaining time together. Kurzweil talks about, among other things, the concept of building God. What does he mean by that?
Well, it's interesting. At the end of his documentary, he is posed with the question, do you believe there is a God? And his closing answer was, not yet. What do you say? And it kind of blows my mind, the arrogance of these scientists. But it's really an age-old process that humans have been doing, creating something that we can worship. And the idea of building God is that we create a machine or an artificial intelligence that is so far beyond human capacity that we actually end up worshiping it. And if we look at this in the history of humankind, and Joseph Farah brings this point up in this film, if we look at it from a human perspective, you see that the first commandment was love the Lord your God. The second commandment, have no other gods before me. So therefore, human beings have been worshiping other things that they've made, whether it's out of wood or rocks or gold. It's these images that we then put our worship to, because if we're worshiping something we've created, it shows we're really worshiping ourselves, essentially. It's just an obscene form of pride. Now we create, let's say, a robot that knows everything. We've got these phones now. Siri, where am I in the world? What planes are overhead me, above me right now? And the phone answers us in a very nice, friendly female voice. And we start relying on it. Like, for example, who doesn't believe in their GPS? Oh yeah, I trust my GPS. I'm going to follow it. I have faith in it. Well, our faith here is the key point. This is the one thing that we have to give. It can't be manufactured. If we believe in these things, we give. This is the whole idea of social marketing and networking on the internet. How many likes do you have? Social branding. Do you trust this brand? Do you trust that brand? We become lured and hooked, and we give our faith away. Yet, when we look at this from a biblical perspective, what exactly does that mean? Can you have faith in Google and have faith in God at the same time? I'm sure you can. But wait till it gets to that next point. See, right now it's just subtle guiding, but soon it's going to be we're going to be in a position where it says, okay, you either worship, let's say, the Antichrist by taking this, an implant or whatever it is, the mark, and you kind of cross through that line where you can't go back.
Well, mankind has always, after the fall, desired to be God, and this technology perhaps gives a certain sense of sovereignty, not real sovereignty. Of course, we know real sovereignty can only exist in the one and true God. Sovereignty is not a shared possession, but it can give a person a sense of sovereignty. They're able to control their world of technology and have technology serve them. I think one of the other aspirations of mankind, whether it be fallen mankind or believers, is this desire to achieve immortality. Do you think that somehow is part of the motivation behind the transhumanist movement?
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you bring this up. There's a movement out there, the anti-aging movement, and one of the major proponents is a doctor named Aubrey de Grey, and he is talking about not only using holistic, healing and eating the right foods, but also taking technology to the point where we are able to live not only hundreds but thousands of years potentially. Nobody wants to die. This has been a fear of mankind for years. I mean, talk about the St. Augustine in the east coast of Florida. They're looking for the fountain of youth. The magical, or let's talk about the Holy Grail and Indiana Jones. You drink from it, you become immortal. This is something that mankind has been trying to achieve. Now we see the horizon line in the distance. We think, oh wow, we're understanding how the human body is working. Science has gotten to a point where it's revealing the intricacies of this, so we're able to then go in and tinker with, God's creation. Let's say we take a shot that allows us to live forever, or what the idea of the singularity is that you can take a human consciousness and, let's say, map that all out and then download that into a computer, and then presumably you are able to control any kind of body using your consciousness. It's now been downloaded and copied to create an army of oneself. This sounds so sci-fi, but this is literally conversations that people are having.
So we should expect that as Jesus promised eternal life and abundant life, that Satan would have a counterfeit form of immortality, a counterfeit form of sovereignty, as he's always tempted fallen man to become like God, as he wanted to before his fall. And so all of the satanic allures and deception are wrapped up into this whole transhumanist movement. It's much more than a technological movement, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a mindset. It's an age-old mindset of trying to become God and to create God and to be immortal and to be, on par with the Most High. The arrogance it blows my mind. What I want to achieve with this film, and hopefully with the episodes that are going to be coming afterwards, is to really give Christians insight, not to be afraid of the technology, not to be afraid of change or innovation. These are very important parts. It's the world that we're living in. But to be aware and to be discerning.
It's been a great privilege to speak today with Joshua Matriciana, writer and director of the new documentary film entitled Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity. This film is planned to be the first in a grassroots-funded series of films that present vital information about current issues. Our announcer, Jerry Giltner, will share how you can obtain copies of this vital new documentary.
Thank you, Brother David. Friends, if you think what you've heard the last couple of days is pure science fiction, think again. And get your copy of Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity by calling 1-800-652-1144.